Security of the heal anymore. But it is a fantastic card, and it will take a while, I believe, for it to rotate. Tempest of the Gods, is it? Right. I think it'll definitely see play.
Yeah, Tempest of the Gods. That's right. Well, let me know if you tried to trash the Ouroboros card, and tell me if it comes back to your possession. That's
already happened 50 times, yeah. I can't
Alright, so let's hop into the match. So like I assumed, Vengeance Blood got banned out. It looks like the D-Shift deck also got banned out from the side of Kionys. I find that interesting. So let's talk about a bit of the ban. So I wasn't around last week. I know that people were playing D-Shift last week, and it was semi-successful. Why do you think people are still playing it, even with the increased cost?
I think that just comes down to how much did a cost change to D-Shift really change its tournament playability as opposed to its ladder playability. Whereas on ladder, a lot of people are more likely to play, I think, for the sake of time efficiency, much faster decks like aggro or mid-range. All those decks really needed against D-Shift, I think, was just one more turn to send everything face, or one more turn to develop one last threat that goes face, and that's enough. Whereas in a tournament, if you know your opponent has control decks and you bring D-Shift, you could probably increase its cost to 22 and you would still have a silver bullet for that archetypal matchup. So yeah, seeing Akamarured ban it is just like, that is a risk that I don't think anyone with these kinds of slow mid-range control lists would ever take against it. As for banning Vengeance Blood is what interests me though, because I think Kionys is playing the kind of lists like Roach Forest and Combo Dragon that might be able to deal with it, but perhaps there's been a very solid reason, as you said before, it's a wildcard deck, and no one really wants to see something come out of Akamarured that they haven't seen him play before.
Exactly. Like, the one thing that I want to make mention of more than anything else, and Rainey kind of touched on it too, Akamarured has played Dragon and Shadow pretty consistently for months and months and seasons. And if you literally go back and watch all of the NGEs, you can pick apart what he's doing. You know what I mean? And this is coming from Akamarured's own mouth. If you do a ton of research for your matches, you can prepare really well for your round robin phases and all that kind of stuff. But similarly, if you play against Akamarured, because he has so much content out there that you can watch, you can actually start to develop a feeling of what his playstyle is and what he can develop and what he's trying to push for based on the cards he's playing and the way he's playing. So I feel like all of these players have the same thought. I've seen you play Dragon and Shadow. I know how you play those decks. That's what I'm going to leave you with.
That's probably one of the deepest explanations or sort of motivations behind like bans I've seen in a while from the sort of tournament play that Shadowverse has, because it is a testament to how much play style can really matter, especially in the much slower format of tournament play as opposed to what matchups people tend to kind of associate Shadowverse with as much faster ones when aggro was still around.
Yep. And because Akamarured hasn't really touched the techie side of things, right? He's not the one playing these crazy Attendant of Night stuff. He's not the one playing these, Death's Breaths and Deathly Tyrants and all these other random stuff. He just plays meta Shadow, right? He's playing Necro Assassins as his tech card today. But as we know, Necro Assassin is the opposite of what you want to be doing today, right? It can be good against Dragon, I'll say, but more often than not, you'd rather have the Urds and the Attendant of Nights and stuff like Meow chose to go with because you're playing against all these control decks, right? So it's just interesting to me that the deck he's found most success with might be the deck that kind of sends him home today. You know what I mean? Because he didn't tech it properly for the day, and or maybe people are just so comfortable playing against him as that deck that they don't care anymore.
It's funny that you mentioned that. I think perhaps his attempt to bring Necro Assassin, and he does actually play one copy of Deathly Tyrant in this list, which is pretty uncharacteristic of the way he's kind of always run the list. I think today is the one day that Akamarured has made some effort to tech a little bit against his opponents, but because he spent so long just playing the list as it was, it's possible that he has much less experience knowing exactly what card he's not used to playing is going to serve what purpose in what matchup, which leads to kind of the games we've seen earlier, like when he, that one time when he had a Necro Assassin flip and hit a Skeleton, and that itself could have kind of lost him the game, I think against Dungeon Sheep. I don't remember completely, but yeah, that kind of thing could actually be the one weakness of Akamarured, is perhaps he has locked himself into the experience of only really playing the very standardized form of this kind of list.
And this is like completely like meta talk, right? This has nothing to do with like his actual gameplay and like, you know, how good he is and all that stuff. It's just outside the box thinking of, you know, things that go into high level competitive play, just like the thoughts that might be going through these players' head, you know, their development of their decks for the tournament, like even their play throughout the games, you know what I mean? But in any case, let's jump back to it. We see Akamarured have a very slow start, and you can see it all over his face right now. You can see that he's not happy about how the flow of this game is going. He has no threats to play out on turn 4, turn 5, turn 6 to really threaten anything. Kionys is already about to be at 10 play points, and Akamarured's definitely feeling it right now.
I think the absolute most difficult thing about this one turn in particular is those two Necro Assassins are not yet putting in work. They could be very important versus Dragon, but they don't have any fuel here. So he has to throw away a Lurching Corpse. It's super fortunate with what I was about to say that he draws another one, but this hand, not having another Lurching Corpse in it, would not be able to deal with threats from Dragon, because he just doesn't have anything to develop from Necro Assassin. He needs to get the Thane out, I think, is general continuing line of play. Now this is, I mean, it's pretty clear, a very clear-cut play for Kionys at the moment, but this is the first time we actually get to see a developed Genesis Dragon from hand on 10. With
Finally!
Yeah. No other intent behind it.
It's about time.
I'm winning.
That's right. I got a big dragon. You deal with it. I'm going to be the proactive player here. Now, this kind of stinks, right? Because Akamarured definitely has a way to deal with this. He has a few different ways of dealing with this. He can play a Lurching Corpse Soul Conversion, but you want to save those Soul Conversions for the Thanes now that you have access to 8 play points. So he could also Lurching Corpse Necro Assassin, kind of getting rid of some of the value of Necro Assassin to kill this Genesis Dragon, or he can just play Thane Soul Conversion and play the white, but you really want to save that for another Genesis Dragon, not the first one.
Right.
So,
the way you describe it is correct in that there's a lot of different lines of play what Akamarured has to do, but I think the Thane play is probably not likely because that Soul Conversion has a lot of weight in it right now. He has one Lurching Corpse, and aside from that, his hand is just locked with 7s. He doesn't have anything to do with these Necro Assassins.
I don't like this play. I don't like using the Soul Conversion. I think I would have gone ahead and used one of the Necro Assassins here simply for the fact because I think that Soul Conversion is going to come in super handy with one of these Thanes at some point.
Yeah, the Necro Assassin into Necro Assassin was definitely a good line of play because keeping that for the Lurching Corpse would have answered a lot of threats, but it's fortunate he manages to completely fill out the curve at the end of it, though, with what he draws. It helps him develop the slightest bit of board and shrugs off a bit of that damage that he needed. Because getting that 2 health back is the difference between these next 2 Genesis Dragons threatening lethal, ignoring board completely, or not.
And I think this is just going to be a Bahamut play. So we just saw 2 Lurching Corpse combos, right? I'm thinking if I'm Kionys, very unlikely he has another Lurching Corpse combo. He does play Necro Assassins, which is fine, but I'm okay as long as I keep resetting him because I have all the threats that I do. But he could also just Breath of the Salamander here, maybe Foresight to draw some cards. I mean, he has a lot of options here as well. He's in no rush. He's got all the tools he needs. He's still at 20. He's probably feeling really good. Just wants to navigate this appropriately.
Right. At the moment, I'm feeling the Bahamut very much, but I guess it does come down to a bit of what could Akamarured possibly respond with. I don't think there's any particular punish for it. He's seen 2 uses of Lurching Corpses. Gonna take a safer route, though.
And I don't mind this play. Like I said, he's got plenty of time. This will draw him some cards here. Hopefully find him a Queen of the Dread Sea is definitely what he's looking for. But even if not, we see now with Zeus added to the hand, plenty of options.
I just had a revelation. That Dragon, not the Dragon Oracle, it's Foresight. Why he runs that in the deck. Sybil's stats got changed so that she actually is included in the first part of the effect now. You can now tutor both Sybil and a win condition with it. Now that is so smart that it frustrates me, actually. That I didn't think
that
of
nobody else is doing it, or that you haven't thought of it,
And that no one else is doing it, of course.
That's right, just Kionys. Kionys knows. He's on top of it.
It has a very strong development with these next few turns. That is a very powerful Bahamut that forces Akamarured to try to develop perhaps Ikter alongside the White King, or perhaps now he just throws in his Necro Assassins.
And what's funny, after saying all of the things that we've said, Akamarured actually just has every threat in his deck at the moment, except for the Deathly Tyrant, right? That he might want to build up to. But if he ever plays one of these Ektars, Deathly Tyrant becomes way less possible, right? Because Ektar into Ektar into Ektar will consume basically all of your shadows for the rest of the game. So Ektar in these control matchups is actually seeming more and more to me like a hindrance more than a help, right? It's great in the mid-range matchups. It's great in the aggro matchups to help close the game. But against Dragon, more often than not, the way we see Shadow win is through Deathly Tyrant by building up shadows, and we just see the Ektars being held in hand. So maybe this isn't what you want to see, as funny as that might sound.
Yeah, it's very interesting to me, especially how Ictor has been kind of changed over time, and that he can never really seem to make up his mind on how many shadows he wants to use, every multiple of 3 and now 8. But as things have developed in that direction, we're seeing like both Ictor and Thane, to get full value, end up using a lot of shadows. Even now he loses 4, and that chunks a lot away from the Immortal or the Deathly Tyrant that he could be seeking to try to help finish this game. But it's I think the toughest part of this matchup kind of just ends up coming down to that hedging how he budgets his shadows.
And it's not like this type of play, like losing 4 shadows. Oh, losing 4 more now. Okay, to protect against a possible Storm follower here. I like this. This is basically asking for another Bahamut, but as we know, Kionys does not have access to one at the moment.
I made that Scyther draw so spicy for Kionys here as well.
There's not really an effective way to deal with these whites, though, unfortunately for him.
If he had a Breath of the Salamander, well, I think he has the luxury to try for one more draw with the Dragon Oracle. After that point, it really just comes down to using Sybil and Scyther to try to clear a little bit and heal. It's not a terrible position to be in, but I do think there's definitely more that he can draw that would help him here.
I think Breath of the Salamander would actually be the best card he could draw, and because, and it looks like that is the play. Look at that. Look at that.
Easy.
You know what? I think Mofu, me and you, I think we've unlocked the mind of Kionys, and I think we're firmly and comfortably inside of it right now.
We're actually his deck at the moment. Like just the same entity that knows where to find. Now, you know, if he oracled
the physical manifestation.
Oracling first was a very important part of that. But
yes,
I think that Breath of the Salamander might have just single-handedly sealed the game. I think it is like worth stressing that was perhaps the most powerful draw he could have gotten in that moment against a very threatening board.
And now he can just play Genesis Dragon Evo Face. On the crackback, he's got to worry about Seris healing, right? So that would put him back up to 10. Never mind. Okay, so he can't do that. He has to kill Seris this turn. So that means that Scyther probably goes into it, and then maybe Sybil comes into play to evolve, or maybe just Sybil to deal with the Seris, and then play Fervor to fully heal this turn.
That is possible. I'm thinking about this line as well. If he does 9... Yeah, never mind. The Seris is like...
It's so good. Seris is so good. Always so good.
It is just barely enough healing. Like, just barely. It may be as you called it. I think the Fervor is a very wise thing to go for here.
It's a bit risky, though, because it does offer up an overdraw, and that overdraw could be a Queen of the Dreadsea, which you definitely don't want to happen.
True. But I think finding cards, especially when you want like 10-cost cards like Dreadsea or Bahamut, would have made it a very strong play. But decides not to go for it. I think that's a very reasonable risk to not take.
Doesn't need to. Going to 19 might as well be 20 this turn because Ektar cannot kill you.
It's kind of interesting how Life Advantage sort of works so differently between many different matchups. It's like your defense, your leader defense doesn't really matter against Mid Shadow until it is your last spent bit that the last ejector was able to manage to take away.
Right.
How much you need always constantly fluctuates with how much damage Ether can threat. Go ahead.
That's right. And I was just going to say, but I think Akamarured has finally found himself into a position where he can actually win the game, but Kionys is just one card away always at this point. If he finds the Queen of the Dreadsea, the game just ends.
Now, think it is... Okay, he only runs 2 Queen of the Dreadseas, and perhaps also worth mentioning is that he has tried to tutor for one with that one previous Dragon's Foresight. So it could be said that he runs 4 total potential copies of it. 2 being the actual card and 2 being tutors, but the tutors would be a turn delay. At any point if he draws it, as you mentioned, it is game, but I think there's a lot of other draws that could potentially kind of put him back in things as well.
Well, Bahamut would be another great draw. Again, like any stall cards are just good, right? Like anything he plays to actually stall the game longer is always in his favor, because Akamarured doesn't really have the threat of winning. But Kionys gets there. You see the elation on his face, jumping out of his seat when he saw that one.
He had a lot of time to work with on this as well, which is what probably makes it so satisfying. I mean, 2 copies in the deck, he searched for it, didn't find it, but halfway through, it's right there in the middle.
And he gets the full combo with it. Exactly what you want to see.
Now, how did he get the other 3 damage earlier this game? Was it the Genesis Dragon hit face and then Ceres over the course of 2 Ceres?
A Genesis Dragon hit face, and then there was healing afterwards.
So there's actually just 3 Genesis Dragons that was able to do it, but it's so weird to consider Genesis Dragon as a source of poke, because that really is what the first Genesis Dragon ended up being.
And honestly, it had to be something that dealt that much damage because of the Ceres life gain that happened afterwards. If it was any other amount of damage, Akamarured might have been like at 19 or a possible 20 again. So it's all about the tempo.
If Ceres healed for 3, he would have been won over it, or as a card did.
Right.
That is
if
really,
Ceres was better than Sybil, then I probably wouldn't play any deck that wasn't Shadow.
Right. If Ceres was like a extremely powered up Superer, which she already kind of is.
Yes.
But
she's just really annoying to take off, right? Because you don't really want to kill her because she's just a 1/4, right? Like you don't really care. Yeah. But she heals you for 2 every turn. That's a lot. That's a lot every single turn. It's like Unica, except it's a lot harder to kill.
Yeah, I think that's what leads to Ceres kind of having one of the most interesting sort of sacrifices in the game, in that what you give up for the card is the amount of threat that she poses to the opponent. Even with Aether, I think we learned this from Council of Card Knights as well back in the day. 1 attack actually in the mid-game isn't enough to really count as a threat, even evolved sometimes. It's usually cards like this that have to shine through utility rather than pressure, and that's something that I think developers are really starting to notice with cards like Ceres that can test very interesting ideas like that. That said, she still is such a fantastic...
There is one overriding rule, though, Mofu. Heal is cheat. Okay?
Yes. Heal is
So when you realize your opponent is strictly cheating through game mechanics, you must kill the card, right? Because honestly, as we saw last game, the more time you allow things like Ceres to stay in play, the farther and farther away you get. Say you're playing OTK Roach, you're playing Dragon, Combo, all of these things. If you let your opponent heal up too much, then you're just out of range to actually kill your opponent again. So healing is just very important, especially in these combo matchups where life thresholds really matter.
And it's also worth mentioning, there's the fact that it's at the end of every turn. If she only healed once as a fanfare, then Kionys would not have had to spend any time thinking about not just sending the other 2 Genesis Dragons face twice in a row. It was because she could heal him to 10 on that second tick for 4 total, was what had to change his line of play there.
Yeah, Ceres was single-handedly the card that gave Akamarured a chance in that game. Absolutely.
Which is kind of cool to think about, considering Ceres has been cut from other lists like Meows. But, getting into this game, I feel like Kionys is poised to move forward here. I feel like Roche can definitely, between Mid-Shadow or the very, very slow sort of neutral ramp dragon that Akamarured is playing, figure out a way to just get to its combo.
Absolutely. I think Mid-Shadow is still one of the best decks in the game. It's mostly just, it's pretty slow, and when your opponent's playing 2-3 combo decks against you, they have all the time in the world they need to set up. It might not seem like that because Ektar can come down on 7 and yada yada, but if you notice, Shadow spends more time trading in the early game than it does dealing damage. Its main focus isn't to deal damage in the early game, it's to solidify the board.
I think it is also then worth highlighting just how powerful of a tool Wood of Brambles is. This is not just a card that kind of offers this little amount of value to you. It is a card that, like, if resolved properly upon any number of fairies, even if it's the fairies that it gave to you, then that's the board. That is the board for you for like the entire early game. I think it is this. The card kind of serves as this massive, sort of sturdy pillar upon which, like the entirety of every, it feels like Forest Craft lists early game can kind of just lean on very reliably.
100%. I actually thought that it was going to be Lilac that served as that kind of like early to mid removal / like board control type of card, but most, if not all, of the OTK Roach decks that we've seen these days don't even run Lilac because Wood of Brambles is so effective at the job that it does.
It's probably just like the combination of the fact that Forest already has some pretty premium removal tools, things that even synergize with it, like Sylvan Justice, bodies that inflict damage as they enter the board like May. It's very easy to lock your opponent into these impossible attacks like the one that is facing Akamarured right now. This Bone Chimera has basically been given the text of a Tentative Knight. It can't actually attack followers.
It can if you want to pop it to, say, go into a Prince Catacomb turn, but again, you're giving up a damage to face. You're not really gaining too much tempo from it, but this Wood of Brambles is going to go away. However, we do see Kionys with another one in hand, so he can actually just maintain this board pressure turn after turn against Akamarured if he so chooses.
Right. The Belinus is a really, really fortunate line to go for there. It does kind of help put away a little bit of the damage that Kionys has been threatening. I think the only thing that kind of makes it tough for Kionys here is, even though he has a very strong and convincing control of the board here, especially with the next Wood of Brambles coming in, he doesn't really have future developments for where this is all actually headed. He doesn't have any roaches in hand, and aside from the Elven Princess Mage he was able to develop earlier, he doesn't really have any searches or tutors like a Goblin Mage that might help him get on his track.
Looks like he's deciding to go for a bigger board clear here. I like the turn that he's deciding to do this to. This is turn 5. So turn 6 would be another setup turn for Akamarured, and this Wood of Brambles will be sticking around for that turn as well. And I think it's funny, this used to be completely flipped, right? Before Wood of Brambles existed, like, Shadow would just walk over the early game of Forest. Like, these fairies stood no chance to Bone Chimeras, especially if Belinus, you know, got included earlier, things like that. Skull Beast even, just so oppressive against the early game of Forest, but Wood of Brambles just completely changes that around.
I mean, there is often times that I feel like the single strongest element of Wood of Brambles is the fact that it inflicts damage before the actual battle resolves. If it was anything else, like your follower gains one attack during that battle only, then we might see a completely different game. It would be a completely different class, in fact. And I think it would still even then be a fantastic card. But what we're watching now is just a game where Akamarured has to put up with the fact that he will never have the board. Even going into turn 7, he hasn't found any of his particular threats yet. Losing this current follower, the Bone Chimera, to the Skeletons just threatens them to being traded in for free. It's tough, but he's not out of it yet.
Definitely not out of it, and I think that if Akamarured kind of does what Meow did earlier, right? Like, just shift away from the normal strategy. I have Deathly Tyrant in hand. I have all this Shadow generation. He's going to be continually clearing my board. All I need to do is get so much poke damage in. I need to get him down to 13, something like that, and that's all I really care about. And then beyond that, whatever I draw, what I draw. You know what I mean?
I think even just going for that play, that's it. He develops a board that's pretty difficult to clear on the side of Kionys if he wants to continue this. Even though he does have the Wood of Brambles still up, that's a lot of Skeletons and not enough followers to trade into them. Kionys has to start going for his combo here, and that's going to give Akamarured the time to start sort of cycling out his own cards to try to get this Tyrant threat active.
Plus, as you said, Kionys might have had the early game and the early advantage here, but he doesn't really have anything to push into the late game. He did just draw Fina, so he can tutor for one of his Goblin Mages into one Roach, but he doesn't have Bounce, he doesn't have multiple Roaches, he doesn't really have anything. He does have pieces that could come together with Ancient Elf, Airbound Barrage, and things like that, but nothing really solid to actually build a game plan around at the moment.
Something I wanted to mention, though, is despite that, he does have a lot of time, because one of the weaknesses of Tyrant is it doesn't have King Elephant's effect. It can't get through wards, and sometimes that's actually super important with Shadow, because it's a very huge commitment of resources into a single Storm follower. And he has an Aaron and an Ancient Elf here to possibly block for it when the time comes. I think it heavily can start to come down to what's Akamarured going to draw in terms of the removal he can have for wards once he gets to that shadow count.
It won't be long now. So sparkly.
Unfortunately, again, we're in the same spot where, you know, Akamarured has these Ektars in hand, but does he want to play them? Does he want to get rid of those shadows to kind of get rid of the end game? Does he just want to push face? You know, this is a really tough situation for Akamarured.
Oh, I flinched for a second because I was so certain for that perhaps Zombie Party would have been the play. But seeing that, it's rough because Wood of Brambles makes every single fairy capable of trading back into the 4-2 zombies that are supposed to be clearing here, but alright, that's all of his shadows, or most of his shadows gone. I don't think this Tyrant's going to be an active threat for long anymore.
No. Tyrant is now a 6-play. Now, the one benefit it does, and we've seen this win games before because you don't really think about it, it is still a 6-play .33 with Storm. So normally, Shadow can't really do anything to kill you, like, you know, on their turn, other than doing some crazy Thane play or something like that. But Tyrant does still have this effect where it can still act like a Demonic Strike to your opponent's face if it needs to.
We'll see whether or not that pays off. I mean, Kionys still can't navigate around this Bone Chimera because the 3 skeletons will give him the damage on the Eater, and if that's not lethal, then as you said, that's the Tyrant's job. But I don't know. Wood of Brambles, I think, has single-handedly carried Kionys to what looks like a very solid position that could just be winning the game soon, because he was able to trade into an Eater with a Fina. That is 5 into 7 in the development of the combo.
That feels good. And you get to keep your Fina around, and it's a threat that cannot be traded into by this Bone Chimera.
It is
like
turn
infinite Bramble Works is awesome. Yeah, we're almost on turn 8, and that Wood of Brambles has been in play the entire game.
Right. I mean, turn 8 and Akamarured has not had a single trade favorable or like present itself to him other than his attempts to sort of compromise the board with the Belinus earlier. So in this situation, sort of robbed of the ability to make any trades to meaningfully take control of the board, I think the best thing he has going for him is Zombie Party this time around.
Yeah, I think Zombie Party here, let the Wood of Brambles fall. I mean, you have to get the 5-1 off the board. I don't think there's any situation where that's not the case. I mean, I think what he's considering possibly is trading the Bone Chimera just for the 2 skeletons into an Ektar, because that'll give him the 8 shadows to clear board.
Okay. Oh, he does go for it, but
okay. Does it in such a way that he doesn't get the extra zombie, though, so these can't actually trade.
I'm noticing a look of pretty intense frustration on him here. I think as he spotted that play, he rushed into it a little bit and forgot that these skeletons aren't going to be good companions of trading for him. I think he wanted that clear.
I think what happened that turn was he forgot the Prince Catacomb trigger was on the Bone Chimera, didn't realize the 3rd skeleton was going to come out, and immediately played the Ektar. I think it was just a play into a play, and you can see it on his face right now. I think that's exactly what happened. It's one of those plays. I mean, when you're stressed, when you're behind, when you're not used to losing, you know what I mean? And then it's just a simple, you know, oh crap, I forgot Prince Catacomb effect. Can you know, change the course of your day.
Yeah, which like single-handedly is just such a huge difference. It's the difference of this current fairy, which is about to go face, surviving, and the difficulty of kind of compromising back onto this board that Kionys is now just fully able to develop. I mean, once again, Kionys doesn't really have this fully developed Roach combo or anything close to it soon, but I think he has so much time due to how slowly he's forced Akamarured to play the past 8 turns.
And now with these Ektars being gone and the shadows being used, this Deathly Tyrant is way far away from being effective. Akamarured doesn't really have anything to push the board back into his favor. I mean, he does have Zombie Party that can kill Cassiope. We've talked about that a couple times already. Push back, but all these fairies are still alive. Aaron is now in duplicate in Kionys' hand to give him Evo points back and to kind of take that presence back away from Akamarured. So I think this is going to be really rough. With only 1 Ektar left in the deck, and no Thane's being drawn yet, I think Akamarured's in a really tough spot here.
Also worth mentioning, if at this point Akamarured does actually commit towards trying to develop this Tyrant as a last-ditch opportunity for burst, not only does Kionys have a lot of wards available in hand, but the double heal from 2 errands pushes him out of range, and that the first 13 that's still in. But anything past or above 13, and Akamarured has to find that damage somewhere else.
I think this turn, honestly, if I'm Kionys, I've already seen 2 Ektars. Yes, you could have the 3rd one in hand. I might actually just go for an Aaron and just smash face here.
Right. The Lurching Corpse cannot guarantee, unless you trade it into zombies at the same, in the same line of thinking, actually taking away that body of Aaron.
Because the other line of play I'm thinking of, you trade all 3 fairies into the Lurching Corpse, right? Well, not all 3. You attack face with 1, you trade 2 into the Lurching Corpse. Your board's gone. Then you can play Aaron, not worry about that Lurching Corpse in play. Okay, it looks like that's what Kionys is going to do instead. The other play is you could just go face with all of them and... yeah, there you go. You can go face with all of them and just, you know, hope that your Aaron stays alive, but I don't think he wants to take that gamble.
Something kind of rough here is that I feel the pressure to want to evolve this into a zombie. He goes for it, but Akamarured is not one of the players that cuts Soul Squashers. He hasn't seen one yet, so...
But again, if you're Kionys, if you're like, you know what, if he's playing Soul Squasher, that's even more turns away from Deathly Tyrant I don't have to worry about. So maybe he's just got that in mind every turn. He's just like, as long as I can keep him off Deathly Tyrant, I don't really feel like I can lose this game at this point. That being said, Kionys, again, with all the time that he's had this game, still has not managed to draw more roaches or bounce spells.
Right. I think he's on the receiving end of the variance that happens with Forest sometimes. Akamarured, with that play, now has developed a Thane in his hand. Well, I shouldn't say developed, but found a Thane, which can very easily develop now. He has control of the board. It's just, Kionys has had very solid control of this entire game, but the remainder of the cards in his hand aren't combo pieces.
Interesting. Akamarured chooses to lock his board at the moment.
That keys in that there's no ether. There's no threat of that here.
He does lock his board with actual lethal in play, though, so this is perfectly fine. I don't think Kionys can afford to, obviously, not do anything about this board, so... this might finally be a turn where I think I would chip if I'm Kionys. I think I Goblin Mage into my Roach, and then put up an Ancient Elf. That could be a little risky if there is another Lurching Corpse combo or something to that effect. He could go with the Aaron play. But of course we know that there's a Necro Assassin in hand, so all of his plays are actually kind of weak right now.
The line of play you were describing doesn't sound so bad though, because, I mean, it's assuming what threats of damage Akamarured has left. If he's playing around the last Ether, then no play is really effective against that with this kind of board.
Right. You have to just assume they don't have it. Yeah.
Right. But Thane is going to need board space to do any burn damage, and that's not going to be enough. Tyrant's far from activating. The Necro Assassin, it deals with things, but that's not lethal dealt. It's those kinds of little things that might refund the idea of an Ancient Elf and Goblin Mage play here, but he's going to play it safe and go for Aaron instead.
I think because something has to be cleaned off the board, you just pass here. You don't Evo. Now he's essentially doing the same exact thing, except using the Evo. I actually I don't like the fact that he Evo'd here, because if you think about it, with the board being locked, one of those 2 drops has to get traded in anyways.
Very true. Oh, the Ether is actually active here. Managed to find the third one.
Drew Ektar, number 3. Does that put him in a position to win this turn? He can trade with 2.
11 damage.
Okay.
Soul Squasher goes in, the zombie is enough to send that in, and then that's 3, 4, 4.
Yep, that's 11. That's good, though. I would take that all day. 11 damage to face. I have Deathly Tyrant in hand. Let's go. Let's go. I think Akamarured's also thinking about the play of Thane here. You know, what can I sack first, and then do I play Thane and get some extra value out of the damage there, and then set up for Nectar? That's still a fine play.
Right. There's a lot of ways to approach this. I even feel like there is a little bit of hilarity in the idea of going Necro Assassin Tyrant and just sending it all face and hoping that the Thane is enough to finish. There's a lot of ways about this, but it's probably the Aether, I think. Get him to 1, develop the Thane next turn, that's it.
Yep.
Or even just play the Tyrant next turn, that is the reach he needs. I like, no shadows, and I forget the Tyrant existed, even though we went over it earlier.
Alright. What can Kionys draw here to win? A Roach, possibly? Definitely not that.
Well, there is the Nature's Guidance draw. That could decide a lot here.
Okay, so he has the Nature's Guidance, I believe, the Springleaf Drum, and hope to draw into both a Roach and another Nature's Guidance.
Yes, I see that. That is one very, very strong possibility, or, I don't know, 16. That would mean he needs to try to find...
He can do it. If that's literally the play, if he can Nature's Guidance that Springleaf Protection or Spring Green Protection into another Roach and a Nature's Guidance, he will win this turn.
Alright, I'm trying
because
to think.
He can replay the Spring Green.
I'm trying to think of whether there's any possible way to incorporate Ancient Elf in here that might just be too slow. What he needs in a traditional Roach combo is 4-6-7, but... No. 3 bounce, draw a Roach off the top is just going to be 5-6, and he'd be 2 off. But the way this one works out. And it wasn't a Roach.
I guess his line was to draw into a Roach. So that he could... Well, would that have won if he drew a Roach? It would be 5-6. That still wouldn't be lethal. So no, that's not... That can't be the line. And now he just gave away his Roach.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the that's the damage.
Them's the rubs. That was a really well played game by Kionys. I just feel like he gave himself so much breathing room against Akamarured, forced Akamarured to make mistakes against him. All this stuff just could not find the damage in any sort of time frame that he needed to. So Akamarured, I think, kind of slipped under that one. Got a little lucky that game that Kionys, took so long to draw the cards that he needed to, or lack thereof, rather. But I think that Kionys, by virtue of the way we've seen him play, I think does have the edge in this Dragon matchup.
Something that I actually find to be very strange is Ancient Elf felt dead to me all game.
It's felt dead
Both
every
cards.
single time I've seen it in all of these matches so far. Even when we saw Meow had it in his hand, he never really got to play it effectively, never really got to do anything with it.
It's like, it's hard to believe that Ancient Elf, which has kind of historically been the strongest 3-cost follower in Forestcraft for a very long time, I just think that it's kind of starting to wane from having these very strong early game turns or being able to dominate early on, because you have that already with Wood of Brambles now. It is sort of invalidated the need to play out followers early on. It's more consistent with how flexible it is and how well it works with the rest of your hand. That maybe just Ancient Elf is just starting to fall behind in terms of like, what does she actually offer Forest that you can't get out of other cards?
Right. Like normally you would say, poke damage, bounce your Roach, that kind of thing. But a lot of times we see that Dexter is so proactive now that you really don't have time to just poke and play an Ancient Elf. You know what I mean? Like you'll still be putting yourself into a position where you only have one follower in play that they might easily be able to break through and then just keep pushing damage. So gone are the days where it feels good to just, play a Roach and play Ancient Elf and pass. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Or even just finding a Fairy Circle on turn 1 into double Fairy into Ancient Elf doesn't really feel like a common or sought after early game anymore, considering your opponent can just be developing a Wood of Brambles and that's enough to trade into it.
If you are part of my play test sessions, when I play Fairy Circle and Ancient Elf, I have it every game, okay? It never fails. But outside of that particular play, it's not as strong in the other areas that it used to be. It's still immensely strong if you can Fairy Circle and a double Fairy, that kind of thing, but... Yeah, like you said, it's not the most consistent of things.
Yeah, at the very least, I think Kionys has a much more attractive-looking opening hand here. Akamarured starting slow, the way this deck always really will. And we have Fina coming in with a Roach already found from a Goblin Mage and 2 Fairy Circles. A lot of potential here. What he needs, though, I think, is to develop actual control of the board.
Talk to me about no Wood of Brambles on 2, especially when you have 2 of them in hand. Why would Kionys not play that?
I think noticing how much value it afforded him early on and thinking about what followers am I going to have to watch for against Dragoncraft, he's thinking it's just going to be these 2 cards really, Dragon Summoner and Ayla. They don't have very threatening bodies. I can just take my time and wait and develop this after they've come out, so that things become much more difficult for Akamarured to deal with when he actually has a bit of board.
Okay. Okay, I feel it as wasted opportunity. I don't think there's any reason to hold both of them in hand, because you're not going to have enough time to really have that matter in a dragon matchup. And possibly you gave away a little bit by doing that. Like, he didn't Fairy Circle on 1, he didn't Wood of Brambles on 2, he just waited with the cards. The Fairy Circles I can see because you can always combo with those cards for Roach. But the Wood of Brambles play a little odd to me, that's all.
Alright, he does kind of use it here, but the extra damage it dealt ended up not being too important, and Kionys killed one Ayla, actually clears both Aylas here.
Wow. Doesn't get the chip damage in, that's very important to note, I think.
Sets Akamarured to 7. I mean, that's the first time I have ever actually seen a player kind of go in at the Aylas like that. He opened up the possibility of Sahagwil if Akamarured wanted it. It gives him so much freedom in how to play out his mid-game, in fact.
In saying that, it's not like Akamarured has like a quick outlet to victory. He's not playing Combo Dragon, so he's not going to win in a single swing. However, because of the board control that he's managed to press, if this Bahamut comes out and it is unanswered from Kionys, which it's looking like it very possibly, or it might possibly be, the Bahamut will just smash in and win the game by itself.
Right. And using the Evo point to set him to 13 is just an extra testament to that. Well, Kionys has one more turn until that happens, and that Lucifer is not an Israfil, so Sahagwil isn't a perfect answer to any of this yet.
The dance ends.
Oh Lord, if Israfil off the top. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I think that would be the absolute end of
Wow,
In fact,
Kionys
trading.
really trying to play this board control game. This is the first time I've ever seen a Forest player do this against Dragon.
Indeed, it made his board a lot easier to deal with any line of play involving Sahagwil here. He could just commit Zeus, smack it in and return it to hand, and another 4/4 for Kionys to deal with when already at this low of health.
I mean, I don't even mind to play like Fervor into Scyther, you know what I mean? Just draw cards, like kill your one threat, don't really care. I don't need to pressure anything this turn, but I also really like the Saha Zeus play. It makes, you know, winning just that much easier.
I guess he wouldn't want to evolve the Sahagwil into the 5/3 because of Brambles, but even just
Right.
using Lucifer for that, or using any neutral for that, doesn't really make a difference.
Yeah. I think Akamarured is just really like, what is my most optimal line? If I was him, because I know that I'm already ahead this game, all I'd be thinking is, how can I possibly lose? Is he going to Evo this? He is.
Now that is interesting.
The funny thing is,
So-
this is the only play in his hand that I wouldn't have made.
I was considering what this might add for him, but that 4 damage is not really the amount of damage that makes the rest of his hand kind of come alive, because his Scyther and Zeus aren't really single-handedly going to win the game next turn, but perhaps what he's thinking is, I get this off of Lucifer, the 4 damage, and I'm set with Sahagwil Zeus. I just play Sahagwil, and the next turn I play Zeus, and I'm done. I never have to play Bahamut to win the game.
But you did give away your biggest life, you know what I mean, advantage, essentially, if you ever needed to come back. But I don't, of course, he's not thinking that way. He's thinking, I want to end the game, and that is a faster way to do it. You play Sahagwil into Zeus now, with Scyther as like a backup removal option if you need to, and then you can just play Zeus again, like you said, to finish off the game.
Alright, it is... So if Kionys were to respond with... well, doesn't go for that, decides he just wants the Bahamut. But if he were to go into Aaron, then I think that would have gotten in the way of things. Sahagwil, Zeus, and Scyther on the same turn. Well, I think Akamarured actually did have...
That
setup.
was a draw. Kionys doing
That
his
is
little
actually-
happy dance.
That is the single draw he needed for this exact moment.
I want to say this happens more often than not. So when I used to play Burn Rune all the time, my opponent would slam down a Bahamut really early, and I'm like, crap, well, I guess I lose. And then I top deck a Dance of Death, and I'm just like, oh, okay, all right, I can win this game again. It just happens. Like, you don't draw your Dance of Death until the turn you need it. It always makes you feel like you're dead before you draw it. I mean, it is the Dance with Death, right? I mean, that's what it is.
Yeah. It has that sense of ambiguity behind it. That kind of is kind of necessary for the card, but rotating soon. I feel the need to like mention this about every card that is leaving, because Dance of Death left a huge legacy on this game. Like, I think that as a card, it single-handedly enabled aggro for a very long time over things like Goblin Mount Demon that used to be played to kind of try to stall boards in situations like that.
I'm happy to see it go. I'm tired of a removal spell that also deals damage. I don't like it. Get out of here.
And 2 damage is a lot. It's definitely nothing to scoff at.
It's a lot. I mean, it's enough to set up Ariat Genesis Dragon lethals. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the 2 damage could be very relevant here as well if Kionys never has to use this Evo point. He just needs a setup for, I think, 4, 6, 7 in Evo. Which is possible due to fairy circles, so...
Trying to think like optimal line here. So he doesn't have a bounce spell at the moment. Oh, he just passes. Still doesn't play Brambles out. Just doesn't want to get those cards into play.
Yeah, he could be hedging for the board space there.
Yeah.
Perhaps. But I think he only needs 4 open spaces on board to get the combo he needs. He just can't do the combo yet because his fairies cost more than 0 at the moment.
Right. I mean, the Wood of Brambles holding could also be a hedge to like other Bahamut plays. Like, if he just plays the Wood of Brambles, then obviously it dies. The effect isn't really important anymore. The important part is if Bahamut does come down, it's like the only endgame Akamarured Red has, then Wood of Brambles can generate, 2 followers that could protect against that sort of attack. Kind of flimsy because they are just 1/1s, but he could do multiple in a turn, fill up the board with them, so.
Right. Now, there's something I'm actually noticing here in the midst of all of this. And I will explain why this Zeus was so important to play without Sahagwell behind it. I actually think the Goblin Mage into Fairy Circle into... Never mind. I'm talking crazy. I thought I saw a lethal setup, but I forgot that he's only on 8 play points because Akamarured just played Zeus on 10.
Yeah, 16 would be the most he could deal this turn, not 18. So I still don't know why Akamarured is favoring not to go with the Sahagwell play into the Zeus. Again, using his last Evo point on the Lucifer before. Things like that. Just a little awkward at the end of this game. I mean, I still think he's a huge advantage now because the Zeus is in play. And Kionys is probably going to have to give up a Roach just to get rid of this Zeus, if not more.
Right, I think it's way too risky to just plop Aaron down and hope that evolving her is enough to create something that the Zeus will then have to trade into.
Right, especially when you're playing against a deck with triple Sahagwell and you haven't seen any of them yet. A Sahagwell into a Bahamut can easily kill any blocker. Israfil, same type of deal.
Right. Israfil would be exactly lethal there. I mean, Scyther would not immediately do it, but it would leave the problem of an unanswered Zeus.
Yeah, looks like he's going to use a Roach to take this out.
Oof.
And has to use the Evo to do it. Yeah, just barely.
Managed to do it in a way that holds the Goblin Mage at least, but still
this
so
is
rough.
said with love. This is said with love. Kionys has developed so much as a player that he did not even time out on a turn like that, where you have to consider how much, like, what type of Wood of Brambles play do I have to make? How do I use my Roach effectively? Do I have to use my Evo point? Did it all within a matter of time that didn't let him time out, which I think is awesome. Because that's a tough play. That's a tough play to make, and also think about how you're still going to win the game.
Right. The fact that Zeus also carries Ward on it, I think, made such a huge difference there. I mean, this is the one weakness I think Roach has as a deck that some other combo decks like D-Shift have never had to really deal with. Of your combo pieces are sometimes like the most important thing you could possibly be holding onto in order to win the game, yet when there's something that gets in their way, you kind of have to expend them if you have nothing else to keep pushing forward. You don't really have that same kind of thing with like evolving a giant chimera into like wards
Right.
and stuff.
Right. Absolutely. And this is a situation that we just talked about, Mofu, both you and I. The Saaquill into the Zeus would have made the game over by now.
Hmm.
And because he did not do that, there is still a chance for Kionys to win this game. Kionys still has access to one Goblin Mage, doesn't have a bounce, but still has an Aaron to kind of play defense for a turn and heal back up here. Like Akamarured, that Evo on the Lucifer, there is not a I don't know. I don't think there's anything that you could tell me to make that play make sense to me.
Evoing it and making it that fragile so that he's only 2 defense left and Sylvan Justice deals with him, that is what puts me off a little bit. Because if you just developed him, I'd kind of understand. You heal back to full, the Fina is not going to cause a turn 6 lethal if it's still on the board, and if he's not dealt with, you know, Kionys has to trade the Fina in or something else anyway. And in that case, if he doesn't deal with him, you just evolve him face for 13 damage and that's game.
Right, exactly.
But there were so many other lines of play that would put on a similar amount of pressure that Lucifer Wolf is something that I'd like to hear an explanation for sure.
All right, so very methodical playing right now, guys. I mean, like this is for a lot of marbles, right? This is, you're out if you lose this game. Neither player wanting to go home right now.
Right, and this is really Kionys kind of playing on the skin of his teeth. He can't make any mistakes here because a single draw from Akamarured in the right direction could turn what is a potential lethal setup into just losing the game.
Now, what this turn is going to do, at worst for Akamarured, is give him a Saaquill into a Lucifer turn to effectively deal with his Aaron and heal back up to full. I think that's exactly what he's going to do. And he can play this Scyther if he wants to deal with the other threat. And I think he should. I think going into turn 10, leaving 3 power on board is not what you want to be doing.
Right, and he goes for it. In such a way that he can just kind of keep his Lucifer in hand. Unfortunately, with how long Kionys has held these Book of Brambles, just one more on board would have been able to annihilate Scyther from being able to be played, but the timing just didn't work out with how he had to develop his hand.
This is just interesting. Like, we've seen Kionys, I feel like, play very, very well for 2 straight games, and both games running into the same problem. Just cannot get a mixture of roaches and bounce cards in his hand, like, no matter how hard he tries.
And it is partially down to, once again, this Ancient Elf is not really helping him. He's now probably forced to use it, merely because it is the only way to find
full Ancient Elf. Yeah.
Well, if it's of any consolation to him, this Ancient Elf's body is actually going to make a pretty big difference, because Akamarured doesn't have anything that impacts the board in hand. He just has card draw, which is going to slow his turn down.
Interesting. He plays the Roach before. Okay, so how does he finish this turn out?
He wanted it to be a 4/5, perhaps Princess Mage.
Okay. He just wanted to put another big threat into play. Okay, this makes sense. That was a great draw.
I was about to say he has pressured Akamarured into using Lucifer.
It's risky.
This is very risky.
Like, Akamarured doesn't know that Kionys doesn't have, like, another Roach and, like, Nature's Guidance and stuff in hand. Ooh.
Airbound Barrage is a bounce, but the Goblin Mage costs 3. Can he 4/6/7 him here? Very Goblin Mage puts him to 6.
No. The Goblin Mage makes it too hard this turn.
Yeah.
Because it's just 7 just to play the 2 Roaches and the Goblin Mage, then you only have 3 play points to work with. Yeah, not quite enough. We are in a situation where I said, though, where you can play a Wood of Brambles and play out a bunch of fairies here, and Bahamut actually can't attack face at the moment.
And Lucifer can kind of clean up the damage that he was able to poke in for, which I think makes the actual lethal setup way harder for Kionys than
so much harder now, yeah. Boy.
Or even just Draconic Fervor.
Yeah, I don't know at this point if Kionys can win. So let's actually count the damage. So you Goblin Mage, you put you put one of the roaches into your hand. You have 7 play points. All you can do is roach, bounce, roach, roach. So you've only played 1 spell before the roaches.
Yep,
So you're
that's
looking at 2,
2, 4,
4,
5.
5, which is only 11 damage. Yeah, so not possible.
Now, if he can get away with playing the Goblin Mage this turn, then I think all is fine.
Yes, here we go. You have to play the Goblin Mage. Perfect. Okay, I like this. This is about as best of a defense as he can put up. Of course, we know Breath of the Salamander can eat this alive, but does not have access to it at the moment.
Scyther impacts the board. That's exactly what Akamarured needs.
Mm-hmm. Lucifer plus Scyther, I think, is the only play here. You heal back up to full. Your Bahamut's still a threat. Your Lucifer is now a threat.
11 play points, though.
Oh, right.
Seems ideal as well. I
Never
always think
mind.
it was for
You know what?
for some reason.
Calm down. Calm down. Calm down. Can't do both of those things. Just kidding.
Ooh. Breath of the Salamander, but it's not active.
No, it is not. Actually, yes, it is. Right? With the clear? No, it's not. Still needs to clear out an additional one, which he can't.
So close to a Bahamut going face. He did heal back up to 20. 2 hits from the fairy. Wood of Brambles. No. Not enough space on that one for the double roach then. Oof.
Well, you'd have to jam both of the fairies into the Bahamut, right? So that you can get the most damage out of your roaches. You can play Wood of Brambles into 1 fairy. Again, that's only 2 spells for a 3 bounce, 5, 6. So you're looking at 14 damage. Yikes.
Is there anything that really redeems this here? I mean, aside from like Angelic Snipe, another Goblin Mage is dead.
Yeah, and now the Breath of the Salamander is in hand. So there can't just be the same type of play that we saw last turn from Kionys. So this has to be going for gameplay, and I don't think it's possible. So with Triple Roach, he can play 1 other spell. So if he goes Fairy into the Bahamut, he'll have room for 4 board space. So he can jam the other Fairy to face, put him to 19, and then he can play Airbound Barrage. Actually, no, because the Airbound Barrage would actually bounce one of the cards in play as well. So 1, 2, play that. 1, 2.
The way I
Play 1
usually
spell,
think
play
about
2 spells,
this.
3, 4, 5. It's not. There's not enough.
Oh, he just showed us his math. 16.
Yeah. Akamarured knows the math. He's like, you got no zeros, bruh. So I think he's actually going to clear out this Bahamut, which is going to actually give him more time. But again, that's only going to leave him with 2 roaches for lethal? No, he already used a roach earlier. He only has these 2 roaches. So never mind.
Against
He
a
can't even do the
20
amount of
defense
damage
opponent.
before. Yeah.
Yeah, against a 20 defense opponent, I don't think 1 roach is ever going to cut it. There's no way that becomes a lethal setup.
I think he's just hoping and praying that this board setup can do it. No, he is going to use it. Okay. With the Airbound Barrage. So getting rid of that effect as well.
What?
Did he run out of time? Oh no!
In...
You can see Kionys is with his hands over his face.
You're strong.
I think that was it. I think he ran out of time. Not a good position to be in regardless.
Oh,
man,
my
that was a match.
God.
That was a match.
Oh my God. I feel like I'm exhausted just watching them because the amount of decision making and stuff that they had to play around for however long that match lasted was absolutely incredible. Akamarured just barely getting away with that win. I mean,